9. Vintage Bugatti. In 2009, divers pulled a 1925 Bugatti Type 22 Brescia Roadster from the bottom of Lake Maggiore along the border between Italy and Switzerland. After sitting underwater for 73 years, it had become heavily damaged and rusted. Despite its condition, the car sold at auction for around $400,000, £294,000. But how did it get to the bottom of the lake in the first place? According to records, the Bugatti was registered to a French address when it became submerged in 1935. Grand Prix driver René Dreyfus had reportedly lost it to Swiss playboy Adelbert Bode in a drunk poker game the previous year. Adelbert allegedly tried to bring the car to Switzerland, but he didn't want to pay the hefty import taxes that came along with it. So he told the authorities to do whatever they wanted with it, and they supposedly handled the matter by rolling the car into Lake Maggiore. The vehicle wasn't worth much. A diver named Ugo Pillon rediscovered it in 1967, but it wasn't until over 40 years later that a local diving club rescued it with plans to sell it and donate the proceeds to a charity dedicated to combating youth violence. Peter Mullen, who owns the Mullen Automotive Museum in California, bought the Bugatti and put it on display there. He didn't restore it, but left it as is, placing it in an exhibit that recreates the feeling of being at the bottom of a lake. 8. Roman-era coin hoard. During a recent family vacation to the Spanish coastal town of Zarbia, brothers-in-law Luis Lenz Pardo and Cesar Gimeno Alcala went snorkeling. Their original goal was to clean up trash, but plans changed when one man noticed something glimmering on the Mediterranean seafloor. He went to investigate and found that it was a coin. After cleaning it off, he saw it featured an ancient Greek or Roman-like face. The coin was in a small hole, and the pair suspected that there were more where it came from. They returned with a Swiss Army knife and found 7 more coins. Lenz Pardo and Gimeno Alcala reported the discovery to local authorities, who dispatched a team of archaeologists to the site. They found 53 gold coins dating between 364 and 408 AD, when the Western Roman Empire was in decline. The coins are extremely well preserved, bearing identifiable images of the Roman emperors Valentinian I, Valentinian II, Theodosius I, Arcadius, and Honorius. There's only one coin with an unidentifiable portrait. It's one of the largest Roman coin hoards ever found in Europe, and it's especially valuable because it could help to shed light on the circumstances of the empire's last days. Researcher Jamie Molina Vidal told Live Science that the discovery reflects the type of fear someone might have when burying their treasure hoard to hide it from invaders. Researchers have found no nearby shipwrecks, further pointing towards the possibility that someone concealed their treasure. 7. Nuestra Senora de las Mercedes wreck. Back in 1804, a treasure-laden ship called the Nuestra Senora de las Mercedes sank off Portugal's Cape St. Mary during a battle. Odyssey Marine Exploration discovered the wreck in 2007. The US-based salvage company raised 594,000 gold and silver coins, totaling a value of roughly $394 million, and sent the treasure to Tampa. Subsequent dives, led by Cartagena's National Museum of Underwater Archaeology, ARQUA, which is managed by Spain's Culture Ministry, began in 2014. The first of 3 expeditions so far yielded thousands of artifacts as researchers ventured into the heart of the ship, including anchors, iron and bronze cannon, copper and tin ingots, a silver dinner service and cutlery, silver candlesticks, a gold pestle, and others, according to a report from the University of Warsaw. The treasures show what early 19th century life was like, making their scientific and historic value immeasurable. Researchers believe the ship sank before Spain joined France in the Napoleonic War against Britain, which started after the breakdown of the 1802 Treaty of Amiens between France and Britain. 6. Riverware Horde. A pair of British divers named Gary and Trevor Bankhead have made hundreds of dives at historical sites around the world. While working under a contract with the British government in 2007, they uncovered a trove of gold and silver treasures from the River Ware outside Durham Castle. The 32 objects, which were once owned by the Queen, the Pope, and other leaders, included goblets, medals, crucifixes, and more. They date back to different periods, including the medieval, Saxon, and Roman eras. The Bankhead brothers also found a solid gold Japanese coin marking the 60th renovation of the Grand Shrine of Issei, the country's most important Shinto temple. But what was it doing in England? The explanation is simple. The 24-carat piece belonged to Archbishop of Canterbury Michael Ramsey, who received it during a 1973 trip to Japan. While visiting, he met Nikyo Niwano, the president of the country's Buddhist movement. The coin's worth around $16,500 in today's money. Altogether, the divers uncovered hundreds of treasures, known as the Riverware Horde. At least 30 belonged to Ramsey. Besides the Japanese coin, Ramsey's items included a silver trowel from India, an 18-karat gold medallion, and a 19th century Russian icon. Among the other objects, there was a brothel token featuring a woman's legs. It was the first of its kind ever found in the UK. The collection also included a 13th century seal and a brooch depicting Queen Elizabeth and Sir Walter Raleigh, a historically famous statesman and explorer. Nobody knows how Ramsey's belongings ended up in the river. One theory holds that he threw them in there as a gift to the locals after he retired to Durham in 1974 and before he died in 1988. 5. Thai bullet coins. Before Thailand got its current name in 1939, we knew it as Siam. Historically, Siam and the kingdoms before it used a type of currency called Phat Duang, also known as bullet money or bullet coins. They were mostly made from bars of silver bent into a round shape and stamped with marks, and were issued according to the baht system of weights, which is also what modern Thai currency is based on. Bullet coins were first commonly used sometime between the 13th and 15th centuries during the Sukhothai kingdom. They remained in use during the subsequent Ayutthaya, Thonburi, and Ratanakosin kingdoms. The currency was decirculated in 1904 in favor of flat coinage. Modern divers, nicknamed Indiana Jones, scour Thailand's riverbeds for ancient treasures. Copper points can reap as much as $15 each, which is twice the country's average daily wage. But bullet coins fetch an even prettier penny, selling for as much as $300 each. Most people outside of Thailand wouldn't recognize a bullet coin unless they knew what they were looking for, since they don't resemble the coins that we're used to using. So to anyone with an untrained eye, these artifacts would be very mysterious to come across. If you found a valuable coin, what would you do with it? Let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe to the channel. 4. San Jose Shipwreck. The Spanish loaded the galleon San Jose with gold, silver, and emeralds. Then the British attacked it off the Cartagena, Colombia coast in 1708. It was sailing as part of the Spanish treasure fleet when the ships crossed paths with a British squadron. The encounter erupted into wages action. San Jose's powder magazines exploded during the skirmish, causing the galleon to sink with most of its crew and all of its treasure still aboard. Only 11 people survived the harrowing ordeal. Nobody knows what caused the explosion, but some experts speculate that the ship's captain shot them because having the treasure plunged to the seafloor was better than letting it fall into British hands. The wreck remained missing for centuries as treasure hunters scrambled to locate it, hoping to cash in on an enormous fortune. Based on the cargo that reportedly went down with the San Jose, experts have estimated the goods to be worth upwards of $14 billion in modern currency. When the Sea Search Armada SSA expedition funded by US investors claimed to have found the wreck in 1981, the Colombian government was quick to establish a new law giving themselves the right to the treasure. Authorities refused to let the discoverers excavate the site, and they retaliated by suing. Long story short, the courts declared the wreck property of the Colombian state. The country's navy rediscovered the submerged ship in 2015, and the custody battle ensued, this time with Spain trying to lay claim to some of the goods. The indigenous Quara people of modern-day Bolivia, whose land the Spanish extracted the treasures from, have also expressed an interest in collecting the fortune. Sea Search Armada is also still fighting for its piece of the pie, and the case currently lies in the hands of the Colombian Supreme Court. 3. Ancient offerings. Along the modern-day border between Bolivia and Peru, Lake Titicaca was one of the ancient Incas' most sacred sites. The once powerful civilization considered the lake to be their place of origin, and its significance increased dramatically during the 16th and 17th centuries. Explorers have found many artifacts at the site that speak of its importance. During an underwater survey a few years ago, archaeologists discovered a small box. Someone made the container from a locally sourced volcanic stone called andesite. Explorers retrieved the artifact 18 feet, 5.5 meters below the water's surface, where it sat undisturbed for over 5 centuries. It contained a llama figurine made from a rare and valuable coral shell, as well as a small rolled sheet of gold. Researchers believe ancient people immersed the items in the lake as part of a ritualistic offering to the Inca gods. The box is just one of many discoveries at Lake Titicaca that were likely deposited as part of a spiritual ceremony. Divers have recovered over 24 stone boxes from another part of the lake, but they found the contents of only 4 intact. They contained offerings including figurines of male and female humans, as well as llamas made from precious metals and other valuable materials. Christopher Deliar, who co-authored a study of the artifacts, told National Geographic that the offerings contained requests of varying amounts and contexts, including political and agricultural pleadings. He also said that the Inca who lived along Lake Titicaca was likely influenced by previous cultures, such as the Tiwanaku, who inhabited the area between 200 BC and 1000 AD. But the exact meanings and dynamics behind the offerings are up for debate among experts, who are still trying to interpret them. 2. A lost empire's gold. Between the 7th and 11th centuries, the powerful Srivijaya Empire controlled much of Asia's maritime trade. The civilization was headquartered on what is now the Indonesian island of Sumatra in the city of Palembang. It left behind little archaeological evidence, leaving modern experts with limited knowledge of what the Srivijaya Empire was like. No one's ever found traces of the city's buildings, perhaps because a volcano buried them, or because they were made from wood and deteriorated. Much of what researchers know about Srivijaya comes from the eyewitness accounts of travelers who passed through. It was reportedly rich in gold and used its wealth to build helpful relationships with China and other powerful societies. The empire also financed Buddhist monasteries and temples in China, Java, and India. Nobody's ever carried out official archaeological excavations in the area, but people began finding coins, jewelry, and other treasure along the Musi River in 2011, and the discoveries continue to this day. Late last year, divers found gold rings, beads, precious gems, a Buddha statue, and other objects that are thought to be from the Srivijaya Empire. British maritime archaeologist Sean Kingsley suspects Srivijaya was a floating city made of wood, which rotted after the city's abandonment and caused artifacts to sink to the bottom of the river. Indonesia imposed a moratorium on underwater archaeology back in 2010, but that's not enough to stop people from conducting their dives in search of valuable items, and those who find artifacts by chance are unlikely to report their discoveries. Unfortunately, this leaves experts empty-handed and unable to learn more about the mysterious civilization and its unexplained collapse. 1. SS America Hoard. The SS Central America, nicknamed the Ship of Gold, was a steamer that sank off the South Carolina coast during a hurricane in 1857. It was en route from Panama to New York City when it went down, taking thousands of pounds of gold and 425 people with it to the bottom of the ocean. Eager to find the wreck, treasure hunter Tommy Thompson convinced 161 investors to fund an expedition during the 1980s. They ponied up $12.7 million for the project. In 1988, Thompson and his crew discovered the wreck 8,000 feet, 2,438 meters below the water's surface. The following year, they recovered around 3 tons, 2.7 metric tons of gold coins, valued at over $50 million. A slew of lawsuits ensued, until finally, a decade later, courts awarded the team a 92% share of the wreck. But the lawsuits continued, as many investors and companies claimed that Thompson and his crew cheated them out of millions of dollars. In 2012, Thompson failed to appear in court and went into hiding with his girlfriend. They lived in a hotel for the next 3 years, keeping a low profile while paying all their expenses in cash to avoid being traceable. The authorities eventually caught up with the couple and put Thompson in federal prison while the case gets sorted out. He claims he doesn't know where the treasure is and has stubbornly stuck to this story while languishing behind bars for the past 6 years. Although Thompson has some supporters, the judge refuses to buy his story and has continuously demanded answers. Whether or not the disgraced discoverer will eventually crack remains to be seen. 9. Nazi plane. While hunting in the forest in 1991, a Soviet hunter came across a World War II-era German fighter plane. He notified the authorities right away, and after doing some digging, they determined the aircraft had taken off from a nearby airport toward the front line in 1943. The destination wasn't far, only about 15 minutes away, when Soviet anti-aircraft artillery attacked it and destroyed its fuel supply system. The pilot, Major Paul Rattle, tried to fly back to the airport, but he didn't make it and he crash-landed in the woods. The Soviet army captured Rattle, and he remained a prisoner for a few years after the war ended. German engineers designed the plane known as Focke-Wulf FW-190, the single-engine, single-seat plane in the late 1930s. By the time the Russian hunter found the downed aircraft in 1991, someone had removed its machine gun. The German military may have done this as part of a failed effort to recover the plane. Finally, not long after its rediscovery, the Soviets removed the fighter plane from the forest and took it to a nearby Soviet base. The USSR was under immense economic strain and just months away from collapsing. Lacking the resources to do anything with the plane, the government sold it to the British Aviation Collection. They restored it over the next few decades, and in 2010, the aircraft finally flew again for the first time in 67 years. 8. Hidden frescoes. Several years ago, Tufts University professor Christina Moranci discovered hidden centuries-old artwork at the Moren Cathedral, a historic church in western Armenia. She was hiding from local police inside the church during her investigation of off-limits archaeological sites when she suspected that there was something beneath the plaster on the walls. Moranci snapped photos with her high-end camera and used Photoshop to enhance the obscured features, visually restoring parts of the hidden frescoes and inscriptions that are invisible to the naked eye, including an ox in the church's apse. She believes the image is an early 11th century depiction of the biblical figure Ezekiel, with an ox, lion, man, and an angel, the symbols of the four evangelists Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But Moranci also admitted that her speculation is inconclusive for now, and that more investigation needs to be done to confirm the fresco's age and meaning. The keen-eyed researcher said she wasn't interested in frescoes when she made the discovery, but that the finding prompted her to investigate other old churches for similar historical features. And while she credits imaging software that anyone could use for drawing out the concealed artwork, Moranci noted the importance of someone knowing what they're looking for. She continues to investigate her findings and hopes to overcome several obstacles surrounding the discovery, including a lack of experts and governmental red tape that prevents researchers from legally exploring valuable historical sites in the region. 7. Medieval tunnel. Electrical workers in Monmouthshire, Wales were digging a hole for a new power line in the customer's backyard last year when they discovered a mysterious network of medieval tunnels beneath a 12th century abbey. Along a brook, the tunnel system's just 4 feet tall, and there's no official record of it being built. Archaeologists who investigated the site don't know what people use the tunnels for or how extensive the system is. It doesn't appear on any maps created by the UK's mapping agency, which dates back to the 18th century. If anyone had known about the site, the power company wouldn't have had permission to dig as they did. The tunnels may be connected to nearby Tintern Abbey, a national icon of Wales that was built in 1131. The abbey fell into ruin following King Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries in the 16th century, which would explain the tunnel's absence in historical records. They may be associated with the ruins of some old furnaces and ironworks in the area. But the discovery is remarkable, as evidenced by the words of technician Alang, who said, "I've been involved in other excavations where we've discovered old wells and cellars not shown on any plans, but nothing as exciting and impressive as this." The crew rerouted the electrical work, and archaeologists plan to excavate the tunnels, hoping to learn their source. 6. Lost Golden City. Early last year, Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities announced the discovery of the ruins of what archaeologists call the Lost Golden City of Luxor. Dating back over 3,000 years, archaeologists found the ancient metropolis buried in the sand last September. It's the largest ancient Egyptian city ever uncovered, according to archaeologist Zahi Hawass, who led the team that unexpectedly made the discovery while searching for Tutankhamun's mortuary temple. The team was surprised during the dig to encounter zigzagging mud walls measuring as much as 10 feet tall. Without meaning to, they'd found a city that other archaeologists had tried and failed to find. In a statement, archaeologist Betsy Bryan described the site as the most important discovery in Egypt since archaeologists found King Tut's tomb in 1922. Speaking with NBC, Howard said that the Golden City will help researchers better understand life during ancient Egypt's golden age. So far, the team's unearthed rings, scarabs, colored pottery, tools, and other artifacts dating back between 1391 and 1353 BC, during the reign of Amenhotep III. The site contains storage houses, grinding stones, and areas for meat production, offering an unprecedented look at everyday life in an industrial Egyptian city. Oddly, the archaeologists found a skeleton with its arms outstretched and a rope around the knees. They have yet to come up with an explanation for the odd burial, and have several other lingering questions they hope to answer through further excavations at the site. 5. Atomic scale wires. During a study that involved examining the properties of silver on an atomic scale, researchers from Australia, China, and Japan accidentally developed a wire just 1 atom wide. As part of the experiment, the team put nanoparticles of silver on the outside of tiny rods with channels inside and tested them in regular air instead of a vacuum as they normally would. When we do this in a vacuum or in some inert atmosphere as people usually do, nothing happens, Queensland University of Technology (QUT) Professor Dimitri Goldberg explained. But we did it in air. The atoms from silver particles diffused quickly, and they diffused inside the channels. The team expected the silver to react with the air and form a silver oxide, but the atoms self-organized within the channels, forming 200 atom-thin wires, each about 1/5 as thick as a human hair. It wasn't intentional, it wasn't planned to make wires, Goldberg said. The accidental creation opens the doorway for the development of atomic-scale wires, something scientists have been trying to achieve for 2 decades. Additional research shows that people could use silver nanowires as thermal switches. At some temperature, the material became an insulator. This isn't common for silver, and is called metal insulator transition, Goldberg explained, adding that the next goal is to make the wires even smaller. What accidental discovery do you think has benefited society the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. 4. Fossilized algae. Geobiology graduate student Katie Maloney knew the odds were against her when she went on a mission to find microscopic fossils of early life in the remote mountains of Canada's Yukon Territory. Despite her slim chances of finding anything, Maloney discovered rare fossils of several newly discovered ancient algae species. They lived on the seafloor 950 million years ago, a conspicuously sparse time on the fossil record. The fossils are helping to fill in what scientists call an evolutionary gap between algae, one of the first eukaryotic life forms, organisms with cells that have a DNA-containing nucleus, and more complex life. While Maloney considers her discovery an unexpected stroke of luck, her keen eye played a crucial role in identifying the fossils. When she noticed hundreds of curvy, intertwined traces containing visible structures within them, she had a pretty good idea that she'd found a fossil of a living organism. Using microscopy and geochemical techniques, Maloney and her team confirmed the fossils were early eukaryotes and identified several species. These findings make up the first fossilized microscopic specimens from the time ever found. Not long after, a team of scientists made a similar discovery, which may also help piece together the eukaryotic evolutionary timeline. 3. New natural blue. It may surprise you to learn that the color blue rarely occurs in nature, making naturally occurring pigments especially hard to find. Many blue hues are combinations of reds and purples rather than true blue. But a recently discovered variation of cyan blue might be used as an alternative to synthetic brilliant blue dye. Detected by chemists as part of a collaborative project between the University of California, Davis and Mars Wrigley, they sourced the color from red cabbage, which contains water-soluble pigments called anthocyanins. Only a small amount of the vegetable's anthocyanins are blue, prompting the researchers to use specially designed enzymes to turn some of the other anthocyanins in the desired shade. They designed the enzyme with the help of a powerful computer, which sorted through trillions of potential protein sequences to come up with an efficient combination. The resulting cyan blue pigment is reportedly nearly identical to the industry's go-to synthetic dye, known as Brilliant Blue FCF or E133. Artificial blues have proven problematic, often posing environmental or durability issues. Some, like cobalt blue, even turned out to be toxic, and Prussian blue released cyanide. The new pigment comes not long after scientists at Oregon University accidentally discovered YLNMN blue, a so-called near-perfect blue pigment, in 2009. It was the first such discovery in 200 years, and came while the researchers were observing the electrical properties of heated manganese oxide, a project that had nothing to do with looking for a pigment. 2. Ancient fish. While studying sediment cores collected from Norwegian coastal lakes, a group of geologists found the remarkably well-preserved bones of an ancient 3-spined stickleback fish. After the ice sheets melted at the end of the last ice age, coastlines throughout the northern hemisphere experienced an uplift, creating inland lakes that effectively cut the species off from the ocean. The recently discovered fish lived in brackish waters around 12,000 years ago, a time when the lake the researchers found it in was nearly but not completely disconnected from the sea. A new study reveals that stickleback populations in separate places evolved to survive in their new freshwater environments, experiencing similar changes in their behavior, function, and appearance, a phenomenon known as parallel evolution. Scientists typically rely on modern-day freshwater and marine species as models for learning about parallel evolution. The rare opportunity to study these types of changes in ancient species eliminates some of the guesswork that comes with differentiating modern evolutionary traits from those experienced by ancestral populations. For the study, scientists extracted DNA from 2 prehistoric stickleback fish and compared the results against modern specimens. Although these bones belong to sticklebacks that died thousands of years ago, when most of Scandinavia was still covered by a giant ice sheet, they still contain fragments of DNA, researcher Dr. Andrew Foote explained. These genetic sequences provide us with a window into the deep past and to the early stages of freshwater adaptation. The researchers concluded that while newly arising genetic mutations are sometimes responsible for adaptation, the stickleback fish already contained genetic variants that made them adaptive to fresh water. But, as lead study author Melanie Kirch admitted, even when the colonizing ancestor carried genetic variants known to be adaptive in freshwater, these variants are not always present in the contemporary population. This tells us that even beneficial freshwater adaptive variants can be lost during the evolutionary process of adaptation, likely by random chance, a process known as genetic drift. These findings are helping experts to better learn the ways evolution occurs over thousands or even tens of thousands of years, hoping to fill in the gaps in evolutionary timelines. 1. Prehistoric Turtle. While searching through the ruins of a church that was destroyed by an earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand, sculptor Paul Deans happened upon a 35-million-year-old turtle fossil embedded in the core of a limestone pillar. Built between 1881 and 1882, the Oxford Terrace Baptist Church sustained extensive damage in the 2011 Canterbury earthquakes. When earthquakes demolished it in 2011, crews hollowed its pillars out for the construction of a new church that opened in 2017. Deans received several pieces of the pillar's cores last year to use in his work, leading him to the rather unexpected discovery. Dr. Paul Schofield, a senior curator of natural history at the Canterbury Museum, noticed that the unnamed ancient turtle species resembles another turtle fossil that a builder found while quarrying limestone in Oamaru in 1880. He concluded both fossils were likely extracted from the same quarry and may contain parts of the same animal. In an interview with Stuff, Schofield explained in his own words that turtle fossils are really rare in New Zealand. Nobody's ever found similar turtle fossils in Oamaru in over 150 years of quarrying there. He added, "It's amazing that this new fossil was sitting inside a pillar for 130 years. It could have been lost forever." Scientists will study the newly discovered piece and will examine microfossils surrounding the turtle to determine if the 2 fossils are from the same animal as they suspect. Schofield speculates that the prehistoric species was a sea turtle, similar in size to the modern-day leatherback turtle, which grows up to 7.2 feet long. It lived during the Oligocene period, which lasted from 65.5 million to 23 million years ago, when shallow seawater covered New Zealand. If you found a valuable artifact, would you give it to a museum or keep it for yourself? 10. Bolivia Train Graveyard. Salar de Uyuni, the world's largest salt flat, is situated high on a mountainous plain in southwest Bolivia. In 1888, as local mining grew, British engineers were invited here to develop a railway network that reached the Pacific. Bolivian authorities believed if the country had a decent transport system, the area would flourish. The lines were finished in 1892, despite persistent sabotage by the local Aymara indigenous people, who considered the railway a threat to their way of life. Tin was an especially profitable material, and soon Bolivia became one of the world's leading producers. However, by the 1940s, the mining industry had failed due to the exhaustion of mineral reserves. Many steam trains were left abandoned on the salt flats when the railway fell out of service. Today, the sight of rusted steam engines frying in the desert sun is rather unusual. Dozens of decaying trains scatter the region. Because there are no gates or guards, the metal components of most of the trains have been taken, and some of the gutted sections litter the surrounding area. The train cemetery, marked only by a small sign that doesn't explain very much, has become something of a tourist attraction. There's been plans to convert the area into a museum, but nothing has been finalized. 9. Alang Shipbreaking Yard. While some ships, especially military ships, are sunk deliberately to make man-made reefs, the vast majority are broken down and repurposed for scrap. The Alang Shipbreaking Yard in India is the largest shipbreaking yard in the world. Ships must eventually die, and this commonly occurs on the shores of Alang. The Alang Shipbreaking Yard was founded in 1983. It quickly surpassed Pakistan's Gadani Shipbreaking Yard as the world's largest ship devourer. Almost half of all recovered ships across the globe were recycled here in 2012. Alang has a total capacity of 4.5 million light displacement tonnage (LDT), which is the weight of a vessel without fuel and other components. Large supertankers, auto ferries, container ships, and in the past ocean liners are among the yard's pieces. In 2009, the Sea-Wise Giant, the world's longest ship, was broken up in Alang. At high tide, these ships are beached, and as the tide recedes, hundreds of manual laborers begin the perilous and time-consuming task of disassembling them. What may be rescued is saved, and the remainder is discarded. The Indian Union Finance Minister promised in 2021 that the country's ship recycling capacity would be doubled by 2024. More ships from Europe and Japan would be brought in to fulfill this goal. In 2020 alone, there were 196 ships beached there. India doesn't have the strongest marine environmental protection policies, which presumably made it easier to carry out the dangerous and unpleasant task of destroying the ships. Environmentalists there say several coral reefs have been entirely devastated. According to them, there are also toxic wastes, unusable oil, harmful gases, and even radioactive elements trapped in Alang. This place is basically one giant toxic graveyard for ships. 8. Basnasar Cemetery. A visit to the junkyard probably isn't on your list of things to do in Sweden if you are planning your next vacation there. Unless, of course, you're a vehicle fanatic who can cheerfully spend hours staring under the hoods of numerous rusted out-of-use cars. If you are, then the Basnasar Cemetery is the place for you. The Basnasar Cemetery is located deep in the forest of Värmland near the Swedish-Norwegian border. The junkyard was founded in the 1950s by two brothers who collected old abandoned cars. They managed the business out of a house erected in the middle of a wooded field. The wrecked vehicles sat in the field at the front of the home, creating a front lawn that looked like something out of Stephen King's imagination. The brothers continued to collect Saabs, Volvos, Fords, Sunbeams, Buicks, Volkswagens, Opels, Fiats, and other 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s automobiles. Unfortunately, taming the dense woodland proved to be challenging. The cars were gradually taken over by nature, and the brothers were forced to accept the junkyard's final fate after 40 years. In the early 1990s, one of the brothers left the area, while the other stayed and tried to sell cars for parts or for their vintage value. Visiting the cemetery now would be quite the sight. The hoods are covered in moss, and tree branches extend through the windows. Rather than encroaching on nature, the cars appear to be blending in with the lush greenery. It may not fit your image of Sweden's countryside, with cottages perched on peaceful lakes, but it's undoubtedly one of the country's most unusual attractions. 7. Dhaka Rickshaw Graveyard. Dhaka, Bangladesh is one of the most populated cities in the world. And because there's so many people, that means a lot of traffic. Cars are bumper to bumper, and so are the rickshaws. Rickshaws are small two-wheeled vehicles with no doors, a chair-like body, and a collapsible hood. One can usually hold 1 or 2 passengers, and it's drawn by a man pedaling between 2 shafts. When festivals are going on, the number of rickshaws on the road in Dhaka increases to about 3 million, raising the risk of accidents and general road mayhem. Battery-powered vehicles that can be easily charged electrically and don't require the same superhuman effort from the driver are posing a rising threat to the traditional rickshaw. These vehicles, mostly built in India, are becoming increasingly popular since they're speedier and can carry more people or heavier loads. In the Mirpur area, a suburb of Bangladesh, thousands of rickshaws piled on top of each other to blot out the landscape, making it an unofficial junkyard. There are an estimated 15,000 human-powered pedal vehicles here, almost all of which are either hazardous or undesired after years of vying for customers on the chaotic streets. The bodies of worn-out rickshaws are deposited at a Dhaka cemetery once they've been ridden off. Have you ever taken a ride in a rickshaw? Tell us about it in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. 6. Oranjemund Diamond Scrapyard. In the small town of Oranjemund, Namibia, a vehicle scrapyard rests dormant. The Oranjemund Diamond Vehicle Scrapyard is the home of one of the largest fleets of scrap vehicles in the entire world. There are even tanks from World War II. The town was created to house the mine workers and is located near the mouth of the Orange River. It's home to substantial diamond reserves, so the location is extremely restricted, with armed guards patrolling the perimeter, and permission is required to pass past the airport turnstiles. Anyone caught in possession of a diamond without permission faces a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison. Workers have been known to try to smuggle the stones out by stuffing them up their nostrils or shooting them over the fences with handmade crossbows. A homing pigeon was once discovered wearing a small jacket loaded with diamonds. A vehicle is not allowed to leave the mine compound once it's entered, presumably to prevent it from being used to carry diamonds out. Some of the rusted machinery from the 1920s, including World War II tanks that were once used to bulldoze sand. Previously, company leaders would proudly display the collection, but now, concerned about their public image, they've begun to refuse to allow pictures of the graveyard to be taken. 5. Motorcycle Graveyard of Lockport. In the city of Lockport, New York, there's an old abandoned warehouse full of old rusting motorcycles. The warehouse was built in 1875, according to city records, and covers an area of over 53,000 square feet, 4,924 meters. Coal cycle sales moved into the warehouse in the 1970s. Coles had been collecting motorcycles and other debris for almost 50 years, and it was once a booming company. But the property was eventually sold, and the business was taken over by Frank Morrill, the building's last owner, in 1997. Frank would later rename the company Coal Cycle Salvage, and he'd sell many of the remaining motorcycles in the warehouse. Regrettably, Frank shut down the company around 2007. The abandoned motorcycle-filled building has slowly succumbed to the elements and time. Motorcycles were literally falling through the roof on some floors. Within a few years after Frank closed it down, the city of Lockport took over the structure. The warehouse was dubbed the Lockport Motorcycle Graveyard and became a popular hangout for vandals. The building was supposed to be demolished in 2011, but it never happened due to difficulties with the State Historic Preservation Office. The office believed that the structure had significant historical value in the area and that it should not be demolished. 4. Chaton Forest Car Graveyard. Until recently, the dense forests around Chaton, a small Belgian town, concealed 4 graveyards with over 500 vehicles slowly succumbing to moss and rust. Only one of the graveyards survives to this day. The origin of how the cars got there is blurry. The most commonly told myth is that the graveyards originated around the conclusion of World War II, when American soldiers who couldn't afford to ship their automobiles home just left them in the woods, with more being added over time. Another, less exciting theory is that they were simply the ruins of a defunct graveyard. The majority of the automobiles were built in the 1950s and 1960s, and many of them were very desirable. As a result, hundreds of them are now missing parts, which are either recovered by collectors or seized by souvenir hunters in search of trinkets. Although the last of the graveyards was closed in 2010 due to environmental concerns, there are still plenty of creepy photos lurking online. 3. Davis Monthan Air Base. Although some airlines place retired aircraft in open-air aviation museums, the vast majority end up in boneyards or graveyards following retirement. Thousands of planes, for example, are stored in enormous boneyards dotting the southwest United States deserts. The geology of the desert allows the planes to be moved easily. If you drive along South Kolb Road in Tucson, Arizona, you'll notice that the familiar residences give way to something strange. Rows of planes, ranging in size from enormous cargo lifters to heavy bombers. They're all sprawled out, immobile and silent in the scorching desert sun. This is the 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group, also known as the Boneyard, and it's the world's largest aircraft storage and preservation facility, located at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. More than 4,000 aircraft and 13 aerospace vehicles from the US Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Navy, Marine Corps, and NASA are housed here on approximately 2,600 acres. Although the Davis-Monthan holds a variety of planes, it's mostly military aviation vessels. Some appear brand new, others are protected from sand and dust by protective covers. Some planes have been reduced to dilapidated spare parts within the hangars, ready to be sent out to various sites throughout the world to assist other planes in resuming flight. 2. Debu Ship Graveyard. Mauritiana's bay is littered with rusting ships that were cheaper to abandon in the harbour rather than dismantle. The city of Debu is the second largest city in Mauritania, but because of the limited opportunities for work, it's also somewhat poor. This economic struggle led to widespread corruption in the local government. Locals began leaving obsolete and undesired vessels in the bay's shallow waters in the 1980s. Ships began to arrive from all over the world to be abandoned in Debu, assisted by local authorities who were only too willing to receive a payment in exchange for turning a blind eye. Over 300 rusting vessels have accumulated over the years. Cargo vessels, fishing trawlers, and even naval cruisers are among the dump. Despite efforts to prevent additional dumping, the number of abandoned ships continues to climb. As a major iron ore exporter, locals have had little reason to dismantle the ships for scrap. However, the half-sunken vessels serve as a fish breeding ground, and local fishermen frequently lay nets between the boats. The government's current intention is to utilize the ships to create an artificial reef in deeper waters, although little has been done since the idea was revealed in 2001. 1. Chernobyl Disaster Graveyard. The consequences of the Chernobyl accident started as soon as it became clear that the situation was extremely serious and the fourth reactor was out of control. Evacuation of population and decontamination of the surroundings of the power plants and structures needed to be done as swiftly as possible. So, obviously, there was a huge need for vehicles to assist in this. Today, many rest in vehicle graveyards in the Chernobyl zone. The radiation from the Chernobyl nuclear tragedy injured not just people and structures, but also the vast majority of vehicles used in the firefighting and cleanup operations. Various engineering vehicles and helicopters, along with special equipment designed for the conditions were used, but then had to be abandoned. That's why Chernobyl is full of forsaken vehicles that you can see almost everywhere in the area of the exclusion zone. The first fire engines to arrive at the tragic site had to be buried underground to prevent the travel of radiation. The firefighting helicopters, whose pilots and crews were among the worst affected by the radiation, can be found amidst the graveyards. Despite the grave dangers, locals have been discovered attempting to salvage metal from the rusty machines. Several people have been arrested in Ukraine for trying to rescue one of the Mi-8 helicopters used in operation. All of them say they plan to convert it into a cafe. Thanks for watching. Which one of these graveyards interests you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.